Welcome to the 2023 NFL season preview. Today we're going to be effectively assessing at least the AFC teams and going through the records that I've laid out here. Yes, there are obviously going to be some that a lot of people don't agree with, but I will attempt to explain why I think this is going to go this way in the best that I can. So we're going to be beginning with the Buffalo Bills, who I've put at a 13-4 mark. You can see the games here. It doesn't really take much explaining to say the Bills win this division. They're an obvious Super Bowl contender. They're good on both ends of the ball. The run game is probably still the weakness of this team, but you still only have that handful of squads that can beat the Bills of any consistent basis. As I see here, I put the Patriots, Bengals, and Chiefs as the teams that beat them, with the Dolphins winning the throwaway last week of the season, where a lot of teams that have already won everything they can win basically rest the starters. So I think Miami gets a last-ditch desperate heave there. That's not really going to matter if the AFC is this good. So yeah, the Bills. The thing with the Bills is they're effectively at the point where it's shit or get off the pot. You know, you've been a Super Bowl contender for a number of years now, and you just haven't gotten there. You know, that has to be the goal now, staying healthy enough that you will finally get your chance to go to the Super Bowl. And the Bills are probably one of my favorites for the Super Bowl this year, but I'm not sure I would put them at the top of the mountain like I did last season, because they kind of proved last year that whoever wins the AFC North and West is probably going to be above them on that list. So next up, we have what is probably going to be the unpopular opinion here, which is the New England Patriots going 11-6 and finishing second in this division. But I feel a lot of people that are putting this team at, like 5-12, 6-11, 7-10, they're not actually looking at the schedule. Look at this. Yeah, the first month is pretty rough on this team, but the Dolphins can still lose to this team, especially in New England. The Jets haven't beaten us in like 10 years. I don't really care that they got Delvin Cook and Aaron Rodgers. We almost beat Rodgers with Bailey Zappi. The concerning thing to me is the Jets' defense. It's a good unit. If we're going to win that game, we've got to figure out how to move the ball better than we have the last 3 years. But I think we can do it. The Jets are not some, super-powered team that's guaranteed to do something. They're basically an imitation of the Packers, and the Packers were only good because they were in the NFC. And then you've got the opening two losses, the Eagles and Cowboys. I think these are two teams that can just straight up overmatch us. And for some reason, I know a lot of Eagles fans that are pretending like this is going to be some surprise and that I'll shut up after it, and that's not going to happen. But after that first month, though, this is where things kind of take off. We've got the Saints. They've got a better quarterback, but I don't really see the Saints as that good of a team this season. We've got the Raiders. They're going to be frickin' abysmal. I do believe we could beat the Bills in New England. We almost did it last year, and that was, with the special teams screwing us out of a game. Now, I don't expect to beat Miami twice. That's just not going to happen. It hasn't happened in a long-ass time. But then it just gets stupidly easy for us. The Commanders. This is a team that's probably going to be struggling at quarterback all season. The Colts aren't going to be very good. The Giants, I think, overachieved last year. We always beat the Chargers. And the Steelers are kind of spinning their wheels in the mud. I don't expect to lose that game. And then you've got the 3-game skid here, because I don't really think we're going to win any of these games, but we might keep an eye on the Denver one. We could beat that one. Add that another one against the Jets to end the season. People are underestimating this team very hard. It's one of the best defensive units in the league. Pretty much the entire reason we were in well over half the games we were in last season. We were only eliminated from playoff contention on the final day of the season last year. And if not for the special teams, we might have won and made the playoffs. That was with Matt Patricia doing one of the most incompetent offensive coordinator jobs in the history of the NFL. Bill O'Brien's not exactly hailed as some, play calling genius or anything, but he's a hell of a lot better than Patricia was. We're not being given a chance when all signs point to us being better than last year when we barely missed the playoffs. So, now we'll go on to one of the teams that is partially to blame for that, and that is the Jets. The Jets are one of the trendy Super Bowl picks, and pretty much year after year, the trendy pick is not who gets there. The trendy pick is the one who has a frickin' slow start to the season and never recovers, and that's what I'm expecting of the Jets. Look at this start to the season. This is brutal. The Bills, the Cowboys, a team they haven't beaten in 10 years, and the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Broncos, who should be a lot better this season, the defending NFC champion Eagles, the Giants, even though I don't think too highly of them, I think they're still going to be able to give teams like the Jets a problem. And then that run ends with the Chargers. You get a brief respite with the Raiders, and then it's just back to being grinded as the Bills and Dolphins come through. This is not a team that has a optimal schedule for going into contention. Rodgers was not able to drag the Packers last year. The Jets only really have the one top-level receiving option. Sure, they got a double-headed running back tandem to maybe offset some of that, but this is a team that I think that more often or not is going to end up leaning on its top-level defense, and they're young. They could have overachieved last year. I'm not buying the hype on the Jets. I've put them at 9-8 and missing the playoffs. This is... people I think are too quick to bite on this team. I could be wrong. I could obviously be wrong, but I've seen the Jets do this enough times to know that it's not impossible that everything they did to push the needle forward ends up being one hell of a fucking brake check for their franchise. So, in fourth place, and this one's probably going to be the most unpopular choice for this division, is the Dolphins, 9-8. Ultimately, I just don't think the Dolphins have done enough to keep up. They've got a very impressive offense, but it's an offense that has struggled against a healthy and top-tier defense. People say, oh, they kept up with the Bills. Yeah, did you see how many injuries the Bills had last season? It was insane. So, I think the Dolphins are going to take a step back this year. Not a very big one. They've been, I think it was 9-8 the last 2 years, and basically just dropping 1 to 8-9. So it's very possible, and I think this is another team that's being very overrated. And I think that part of their struggles is going to be struggling within the division. I think the Bills are going to take them out twice. The Jets and Patriots are going to pick up a win too. So that's just how I see the Dolphins. They're not really in a good position. They've got a quarterback that is having some pretty nasty concussion problems. They, as far as I know, still kind of lack much of a running game. That will kill you. Even in this NFL that believes, why should we pay running backs? Look at the Bills. If they had a top-tier running back, they'd have won a Super Bowl by now. That's just how it works. You still need a running back. You still need the running game. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a good time. So, and the Dolphins' defense is, I would say, easily the worst in the division. You've got you've got 3 top 10, if not top 5 level defenses there. What do the Dolphins have against that? So, moving divisions to the AFC North, now we're going to take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think are just going to basically steamroll this division. I have put 2 of 3 losses to the AFC North because I think the Ravens and Steelers are going to find a way to pull that bullshit win out of their ass, just like usual. But generally speaking, the rest of their schedule is just not particularly impressive. The few tests they do have, and the Bills and Chiefs, I think regular season-wise, the Bengals can win that game. Whether or not they could win that game in the playoffs is obviously going to be the question, because this is definitely a team that I think should have won a Super Bowl 2 years back. Obviously, any team that knows they should have won wants to get back there and do it. But so it's now kind of the question of, can the Bengals get back to the big dance? And I think they're going to have some struggles with that, because the teams that have been in their way in that regard are not going anywhere. So, we'll see what happens come playoff time with this, but yeah, their offense is just going to crush most of this schedule. Come on, a lot of games against tanking teams, Texans, Titans, Cardinals. They shouldn't have a problem with a team like the Colts or even the Vikings, I think. That's probably one of the best, worst teams they're going to be beating. So, second place, I think, is going to be a pretty familiar face, the Baltimore Ravens. Here, more by luck than judgment, as per usual, having a pretty strong start to the season, and then you notice I start mixing in a lot more losses in the second half of the season, because right here is where I expect the annual Lamar Jackson injury. Now, obviously, he could finally play a full season again, but I'm not going to bet on that. I'm not really going to bet on them really winning a lot of these games anyways, because look at some of the teams they've got coming in through these weeks. So I think the Ravens are just going to be one of those ones, hot start and then falter. So, Ravens fans, you can crucify me for that if you want, but your team has really not shown the ability to be more than this. So, till then, you're in this bracket of good, but you're going to need something to bounce your way to get into the playoffs. And even then, do you really want to watch a playoff game with Tyler Huntley starting? Next up come the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I've basically just said, fuck it, the NFL is going to make sure they have a winning season no matter how much they don't deserve it. So, 9-8, third place. The usual, win a few, lose a few, bounce around the .500 line, end up missing the playoffs. But everyone still thinks that Mike Tomlin's a great coach because you managed to get a team above the .500 line. I'm really getting tired of that narrative, but the NFL makes sure that they'll win a game or two that they shouldn't via penalties. That's why I think they're going to take a game like here against the Bengals or here against the Seahawks. So, next on the list comes the Browns. I've put them in at 8-9. This is another team that I think is getting a little overhyped in some regards. Yes, Deshaun Watson's going to be starting the full season, but we haven't seen Watson shake the rust yet. I am not inclined to bet that he's going to. And the rest of this team is just kinda mediocre. I'm not too impressed by the receiver room. The defense can get mauled by certain teams. So, I think the Browns will have some flashes of being a better team than they're going to be, but the thing I think is going to kill them in the end is going to be next season, because next season there's a lot of contracts that are coming up into pay it out, and I think that when they get hit against that cap ceiling, the Browns are either going to have to trade some people or just settle into being completely mediocre, which is about where I figure they're going to be. So, this brings us down to the AFC South. This is, I think, going to be the most open-shut division in this season. There is no reason to believe the Jaguars are not winning this division. They're clearly the best team in the division. So I've put them 12-5. The division's probably going to be 6 free wins for them. So really, you don't got to do anything outside your division than the bare minimum. And while I do have them losing to a lot of teams like the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, the 49ers, I think that these are going to be very close games. I think the Jaguars are almost to the point where they can start taking it to some of these teams. And if they get lucky in the playoffs, this could be a dark horse Super Bowl contender. So, this is definitely a team that I would say keep an eye on. They could horribly underachieve and still win this division as far as I'm concerned. So, we'll move along to the second place team, which is important as the Colts at a 5-12. I think that Anthony Richardson is going to kind of get the needle moving in the right direction for this team, but it's not going to be by very much. The Colts are still just not a very good football team. They're just one of those ones that they've had their moment to shine, they blew it entirely, and now, honestly, I think that most of the players they have that could have really contributed have just gotten used to the losing and are just kind of going through the motions, so I think the Colts are going to stay in the rebuild for at least a couple more years, because I think they're going to have to replace some guys that just don't seem to be into it anymore with this team. So, third place, and the one that I would say has a decent chance of doing better than what I expect, is the Titans. I also put them at 5-12. And while they were pretty badly beaten up last season, this is a team that has been going in the wrong direction. You know, they let Corey Davis walk, replaced him with Julio Jones. That didn't work. They really haven't had a number 2 wide receiver since. They traded A.J. Brown for no discernible reason and replaced him with a guy who's not even half as good as A.J. Brown is. Ryan Tannehill's obviously suffering under this, and to the casual fan, this is where the belief that Ryan Tannehill is to blame comes from. Because he is struggling because the management has fucked him out of basically every major target he was enjoying when he first got in the starting seat in this team. Derrick Henry will continue to be overused as his age advances. I imagine that's going to come at the cost of more injuries. The Titans' defense is going to have to compensate more for the struggles of the offense. And this is not a defensive unit I think can do it. So, if injuries set in, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do, the Titans are screwed. This is not going to be a good football team unless they get just every single thing bouncing their way. That's just where I see it. I don't think the Titans are going to have a very good year. The bottom of the division should be no surprise. Texans pulling 3-14. You know, they could get, surprising win or two here, but really, all I saw them getting there was 2 on the Titans and 1 on the Buccaneers. And all of those are very iffy because this team is sad. Basically, the defense sucks, the offensive line isn't very good, the running game is iffy, they don't have really any major passing weapons, And they've got a quarterback who is not only a rookie, but not really hailed as being a particularly smart one, and that's not a surprise coming out of the Big Ten, where really all you've got to do to play quarterback is be able to hit deep shots to wide open receivers, especially at Ohio State. So, this team's got just about every negative thing going for it possible. Maybe the new coach is a little better than what they've had the last number of seasons, but overall, this is just not a team that is in any position to be much better than last year. I think they're basically going to come out just about exactly where they were last time, which is still pretty good for them. You know, a high end draft pick is never a bad thing. You know, obviously it's a bad thing to the fans because you want to see your team win, but this is a rebuild. You've got to get high end talent somehow. The final division, I think, is going to be a much, much better division than last year. Obviously, the Chiefs are still running away with this. This team really proved to me last year that as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be in contention. So, it's basically just let it rip on a schedule that is not particularly good. You've got a good little smattering of teams that are, you know, on the come up, but aren't really in a position to beat a Super Bowl contender yet. A lot of kind of bad teams like the Raiders twice, the Packers. And they can beat just about anybody on their schedule who's actually going to be a playoff team, too. So, like I said, this isn't going to be a team that loses many games. I've only got them dropping a game in Denver and the game against the Bengals. Though being it is the regular season, they could also drop this one to the Bills. And I'm sure Eagles fans would love to pretend they're going to win this game, but I don't agree. So, second place might be another unpopular pick because a lot of people are on the Russell Wilson is washed up wagon, like the Broncos weren't one of the worst coached teams in the league last year. Nathaniel Hackett had to hire an assistant just to manage the game clock for him. How the hell is that the quarterback's fault? Get your play in faster, asshat. But basically, one of the Broncos' issues was that a defense needs the offense to stay on the field. And this has kind of been the Broncos' problem the last couple of years. The offense has had problems staying on the field. This wears down the defense, makes it easier for the opposing team to score, and score a lot. And what that does, it basically makes it impossible to have a winning team. It's pretty much why the Eagles won the NFC Championship game, though a lot of Eagles fans pull the revisionist history on that, like somehow not having to play defense 90% of the game makes it harder. But basically, they got Sean Payton. This guy's a good head coach. For all the bullshit the Saints management did, he generally had the Saints as a reasonably competitive team. There were very few years when he was there where they were just getting their shit wrecked. So the Broncos should be in a much better position here. So this should be a much more competently run offense. Russell Wilson should respond well to that. The receivers, Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, should respond well to that. The running game should have less problems if the passing game can get going. And overall, just staying on the field more means that the Broncos' defense will be less stressed to stay in games. So I think the Broncos are in for a pretty big turnaround, and I hate this team, so when I say this, I hope I'm wrong. So, finally, we have the team that I think, according to the projection anyway, will end up with the last playoff spot, the LA Chargers. And as we can see here, the opening, expected 5-0 start here, this is going to be another season where I think the Chargers are their own worst enemy. They just go on these stretches of games where they just completely collapse for no discernible reason. Two stretches here: the Chiefs, Bears, Jets, and the Bills, the Broncos, and the Chiefs again. If they could just get out of their own way, these stretches of games wouldn't happen. They wouldn't be barely limping into the playoffs. They would maybe threaten the Chiefs for the division. But this is the Chargers. I have observed this team for, pretty much the entire time I have watched football throughout my life. I know what they're going to do. No matter how good the Chargers look, at some point, they're going to trip over their own damn feet. It's just what they do. And honestly, any Chargers fan watching this, you can be mad about that statement if you want, but I urge you to stop and think for a couple minutes, and you might come to the conclusion that, yeah, I'm completely right about the Chargers being that kind of a team. Now, somehow Justin Herbert's going to get blamed for this, but Brandon Staley should have been fired 2 years ago. So that's just where I'm at with that team. They should make the playoffs pretty easily, but I have a feeling that they're going to find some ways throughout the year to be one of the most infuriating high-level teams. Next up is the Raiders, who I think are just going completely in the trash now. 2-15. One of the worst teams in the league this season. Top 3 draft pick next year. And I really don't see anything to offset what I feel here. Josh Jacobs cannot carry this team on his back. Devontae Adams is probably going to be triple covered with the lack of weapons they've got. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to die in this system. Okay, he might do reasonable because he does know McDaniel's system, but that just goes further into why the Raiders aren't going to be good this year. They're doubling down on trying to become the Patriots, and this is not how you run a good football team. It's just... You don't try to copy the identity of another team, especially when you don't understand that identity. That's why everyone fails copying the Patriots, because they don't actually understand what we did. So, like I said, the Raiders, this is not going to be a good team. I think Vegas is going to just increasingly not give a shit about this team. So, that's just where that ends up, I think. So yeah, that is the AFC side of things. And we'll come back over to the games and go into the wild card round. And this is basically what it's come out with. Right off the bat, I think the Chargers go out. They're not a good enough team to take the Bengals out in a playoff game. As much as I would like to see the Patriots embarrass the Bills in their own stadium in a playoff game, it's not going to happen. And I think the home teams win out because I think the Jaguars are good enough to beat anybody in the AFC West who's not the Chiefs. So going to the divisional round, pretty simple. Chiefs take the Jaguars out a second straight year, and we come back to this Bills and Bengals game once again. And assuming the Bills are healthy, I'm going to take the Bills here. So for the AFC Championship game, Bills-Chiefs, and we know who wins this game when they meet in the playoffs. Chiefs go back to the Super Bowl second straight year. So now we're going to move on to the NFC, and the defending champion of the conference, I think, is going to be, I'm pretty sure, the first repeat winner of the NFC East in something like a decade or so. Something like crazy like that. But I don't think this is going to be as good of a team as last year, because that team got fed. The Eagles' schedule last year was pathetic, and yet they simultaneously only destroyed like 3 teams. This does not suggest somebody who's going to be a constant threat, and I think that there's a good chance that you're going to have this period for almost 2 months where the Eagles are going to be in hard-fought games where they're going to be lucky to maybe split a 3-3, like a 3-4, 4-3 record between these 7 games. So obviously, Eagles fans are not going to like that. They're going to be on the bullshit of we're going 17-0, we're going to win the Super Bowl, blah 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 blah. That's not how I operate. It's just not. I do not hype buy like that. Even the teams I am hype buying are, still like 11-6. This is, I'm looking through the lens of realism, not fandom team nut hugging. So yeah, 12-5. I think they'd take a step back. They might not go to the Super Bowl this year. So, move along to second place, the Dallas Cowboys. This is going to be a close race, I feel. I think the Cowboys are going to give the Eagles a run for the division. Because the Cowboys are a team that is pretty well built up. But the Cowboys' problem is they've got just enough weaknesses that what they've built up might not necessarily work too well when they need it to. And thus, I don't see them quite the same as the Chargers in the AFC, but I see them as a team that's definitely going to get in their own way a few times. And this is probably going to apply to the playoffs as well, because the Cowboys the past couple of years have pretty much been eliminated by their own stupid bullshit. This comes down to coaching, and this is why I don't really regard the Cowboys as a Super Bowl threat until McCarthy's gone. You need a better head coach. This is a team that could win a Super Bowl, but you're not doing it with that head coach. Next, we have the team that I see is taking a step back, the New York Giants, 6-11. They massively overachieved this year. Same reason the Eagles did. Very light schedule where they weren't really challenged too much. They were playing pretty good, so they might not be 6-11 bad, but I don't think this team's going to the playoffs 2 years in a row. I don't see it. Especially not in this division. This isn't, I put them 1-5 in the division. You're not going to win too many games in this division. Unless you can get lucky, but that's not something to bet on. So yeah, 6-11. I don't think they're going to do too well against teams going to the playoffs or just winning teams in general. So kind of a better luck next year. I think this one is probably going to be the nail in the coffin of Daniel Jones, exposing the new regime as morons for giving him $40 million a year. Next, we have the Commanders, who I think they're struggling for an identity, really. And this is both literally and figuratively, because the new ownership might change the name again. And the team kind of lacks a definitive idea of what they want to do. They're going with Sam Howell, a very untested quarterback so far. And while I don't think he'll do a terrible job, because obviously the Commanders do have some weapons for a quarterback to use, it's just a matter of injuries. Can the offense get going enough for the defense to, get its feet under it? And I just think the Commanders are going to have problems with that. So, mixed with the schedule being harder, I think that this is, 5-12 team might pull off a few surprise wins early in the season to, kind of make it look like they'll be competitive before the hard end of the schedule rolls through and just crushes them. So, to the NFC North, as far as I'm concerned, this division's going to Detroit. I see no real reason to think otherwise. This is a team that is building very well to make a run at, finally being relevant. And the rest of the division's kind of in a state where no one's really a good team and there's a lot of overhype going on. So the door's open. I think the Lions take it for the first time since this division's been called the NFC North. And we'll see when we get to the playoff projection. Just maybe the playoff drought will be coming to an end too. Second place, I'm gonna go out on a limb and put the Packers. I think that Jordan Love can do a good enough job to kind of keep the Packers around where they were last year. It's not really a popular opinion, partially because people are tired of the Packers being a good team, and partly because Rodgers' failure to really do anything last year. People assume that Jordan Love can't do anything with this team, but we'll see, because I just don't really think that the Packers are quite as dead as we're inclined to believe. You know, I could be horribly wrong. They could be like 4-13. Jordan Love could be absolute trash, but I'm leery of betting against some teams. The Packers are one of them, because the Packers have kind of been the cockroach that won't die in this conference. Third place, I'm putting the Bears. I'm taking a risk here. I'm putting them at 9-8, missing the playoffs. I don't think this team is that good, but I think that they can be just good enough to rattle off a number of wins that they shouldn't get. You know, games against teams like the Browns, the Chargers. These are the oddball ones that I think the Bears win to go from like a 6-12 or 6-11 team to like a 9-8, 8-9 team. So keep an eye on it, but I definitely don't expect them to do very good in the NFC North. This is too close of a division for anyone who's not head and shoulders above the rest to do very well in. So on the bottom, I have last year's winner, the Minnesota Vikings, 7-10. The reason for this is, I think, pretty well demonstrated by the end result of last season. And while their defense should be better, I don't think they're going to be 13-4 again. I think this team's going to have a lot of problems, especially now that Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook are gone. And sure, Thielen was aging. They have, in theory, replaced him. So that one might not hurt as much. But Dalvin Cook, that's your run game. I do not expect them to be able to replace that. That is going to hurt. It's going to make the offense less effective, especially in big games. How many of these are prime time? Kirk Cousins sucks in those. Which means there's a pretty reasonable chance they're going to lose pretty much all of those games on primetime. Actually, I actually completely unintentionally picked that the way it probably will go. So yeah, the Vikings, sorry guys, but I think you're in for a pretty painful slap back to reality. The NFC South, I don't think anyone winning this division's coming out with a winning record. I think the Buccaneers are basically getting out of this purely by being able to beat their division opponents. Essentially, the Buccaneers, their biggest thing is they've got to get the run game going. If they can do that, Baker Mayfield behind an offensive line that can keep him on his fucking feet can be a good quarterback. We have seen this in Cleveland. His bad seasons, he got sacked like 35 plus times. His good seasons, he got sacked less than 30 times. Do the fucking math. The guy needs protection, and he needs some coaching to maybe give him a little late development. I'm not sure if he'll get that with the Buccaneers, so he might not be, anything special this year, but I think he can be just good enough to get them through this bad division to probably get massacred in the first round. So the Saints, I think, are going to be held back for the same reason I can't see the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl. Their coach is a moron. Most Saints fans I know agree with me about that. They don't like Dennis Allen very much. And while I think they can get a pretty strong start to the season, I think that once they start coming up on some of the oddball games, they'll start losing quite a bit, like this one to the Panthers. The Saints tend to drop those one or two really strange division games of how'd you lose that? But it's just kind of what they do. So I think about the same point as last year. And unfortunately, it's probably going to result in a lot of Raiders fans saying, see, Derek Carr was terrible, even as they fucking disappear into the abyss. So, next up comes the Atlanta Falcons. And I think, at last, this is where the wheels come off. This team's been overachieving in its desperation to get back to the Super Bowl. They should have dismantled and just tanked a long time ago, but I think, like I said, this is the year where the wheels fall off. I think Bijan Robinson's going to be one of the few bright points in what is probably going to be a horrible offense. And I don't think the defense is going to be able to compensate, plus a reasonably tough schedule ahead of them, so yeah, not going to be a very good year. Same for the Carolina Panthers. They traded their top receiver for a quarterback. They're not really setting up Young to succeed. The defense is as overrated as ever. I think the Panthers are kind of in the same boat as the Houston Texans. They're kind of just in this place where you're rebuilding. You're kind of going the right direction, but you're still a ways away. So this is going to bring us up to the final division. The San Francisco 49ers winning the NFC West at a mark of 14-3. A lot of people that I know are on this crap that Brock Purdy's not a good quarterback. He's thrown 10 interceptions in camp, and I'm like, yeah, this is camp. Have you never seen a quarterback throw interceptions in camp before? It's like, what the hell is the point you're making here? He's coming off an injury, and he's practicing for a large part against a 49ers defense that is not only a top-level unit, but knows him, knows the playbook, and thus has a better chance of picking him off. This goes for practicing of any team in the league. They're always going to throw more interceptions against their own team than they're going to in actual games. People need to chill out. I think the 49ers are going to be fine as long as they can keep Brock Purdy on his feet. So, yeah. Though, with the resurgence of the Rams, I think two of these losses are going to be to the second-place team in this division, the LA Rams, 10-7. This team faltered because of a lot of injuries, and I think they're going to be pretty eager to show that last year was a fluke. But I don't think they have it in them to come back quite strong enough to be a Super Bowl contender, but I think they can get their way back into the playoffs at least. Or the Rams could just go the complete opposite way. No one could give a shit anymore, and they could just be terrible. It could go one way or the other with this team. So this is kind of, I would say, the oddball team this season. That if anybody's gonna do the opposite of what I say, this is going to be one of the teams to watch. Third place and second to last team out of the playoffs is the Seahawks. I think that teams are going to be much better prepared to deal with Geno Smith this year, even with the added weapon for the number 3 receiver. Ultimately, this defense just isn't anything special. The offense doesn't lack a running game, but it's not a special running game either. It's just one of those ones that if you could figure them out, you can beat them. And I think that teams, now that they've had a season to adjust to the fact that Geno Smith is a starting quarterback in the NFL again, I think that the Seahawks will be in a much worse position this time. So, last, and the team that I frankly expect to end up with the number 1 pick, is the Arizona Cardinals. This team is fucking terrible. You know, you've got Kyler Murray coming off a torn ACL. You've got a new and hopefully better coach, but what does it really matter? Your lead back is still James Conner, last I checked. Most of the receivers worth a damn have checked out. Zach Ertz is getting older. The offensive line sucks. The defense is trash. This is just the definition of not a good football team. I don't think they're going to have much success this year, and the sad part is, unfortunately, people are going to blame Kyler Murray like he's supposed to somehow make a playoff team out of a fucking waste bump. I'm hoping he gets traded after this season to a team that is significantly better who needs an upgrade at quarterback. Because the Cardinals are destroying this kid. He hasn't had good coaching. He hasn't had management that can build a team. In fact, he's had management that does the exact opposite. The management made a team that cannot function at this level of competition. So yeah, this is who I expect to be the number one pick. 2-15. Would honestly be surprised if they go 0-17, but I say that for a team just about every year. Somehow they manage to win like 2 or 3 games every time. I don't get it personally, but that's just how it is. So let's go back to the schedule and the wild card round to project the NFC side of things. I expect Packers get slaughtered if they make it here. 2 versus 7 has not been a very fair matchup since it's come into existence. This is an interesting 6 versus 3, but I'm gonna go with what I said. I think the Lions, at last break the playoff drought. They at last pick up that win. And the Cowboys make easy pickings of the 4-seeded NFC South winner. And like I said, reproject that. So, here's one that... This one's probably going to go the same way as it did last year. 49ers win. Cowboys probably lose on some last-minute stupid shit. This is the interesting one for me because this was a close game last year. Really, the Eagles only won because of a 4th down conversion. So, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think that the Detroit Lions go to the NFC Championship game, making for a Lions-49ers NFC Championship, and under the circumstances, I don't think the Lions are good enough to win that one, so we're getting a rematch of Chiefs-49ers that I expect ends the exact same way. Chiefs become the first repeat champion since the 2003-2004 Patriots. That is my projection on the season. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, I don't expect to be 100% right. Things will obviously change as the season goes on. My opinion of how things are going to shake out will change as well. So, football is around the corner, and I will see you most likely... let me go back to week 1 here just to see exactly when the season begins. Probably see you... maybe like the Thursday or so before that, so... Oh yeah, let me just check my calendar. Yeah, I'll probably see you like the Monday or Tuesday before the season begins for the week 1 picks, and then of course after that for the reaction to the week.